So here we go, yet another day on the really interesting bit. Is this still the Meseta? Classed as a Meseta?
Still the Meseta. Until it gets to Galicia, still the Meseta.
And today I'm having a chat with Ramon.
El Ramon!
He's not the guy from the movie.
La.
But he's actually another Aussie. What kind of an Aussie? Because you're from here originally, aren't you?
Yes. From
Spanish originally.
Spain originally, but moved out to Perth like a lifetime ago. But
so how cool is that? Coming back and walking the Camino, you're Spanish, you speak fluent Spanish. Must be really cool.
My Spanish friends call me a hybrid because it can float between Spanish speakers. Like even last night when we're at the Donativo, the hospitaleros asked me to translate for them, and it's kind of a pretty surreal moment.
Yeah.
Having to translate Spanish into English and these 19 different countries. And yeah, it's just, I think it's awesome to be able to do something like the Camino and know Spanish, but English opens your boundaries for everyone.
Oh yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't want to admit it, but English really is an international language. And so I've met Danish people, I've met Germans, I've met in just these most interesting conversations. And that's something that you probably just don't get when you, for example, I can't speak for everyone else, but in Perth you just simply don't get this.
No.
You know, you get a combined shared experience of like going to the beach and you know, Australia Day and all these kind of like normal perhaps
it's very insular, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very, again, Perth is, as the tagline says, the most isolated city in the world, and I tend to agree.
Mm-hmm.
So learning, I think as we rocked up to La Rosaña, because I started walking with a couple of Spanish guys, as a stereotype goes, they go for siesta, and I just simply can't go for siesta in the afternoon.
So even on the Camino they over siesta?
Yeah, of course they do.
Oh,
there's not that many Spanish people doing the Camino.
Be a lot more later on, I think.
They're in the minority. Yeah, they start in Sarga.
Yeah.
Because obviously the last 100 kilometres you can get your Compostela.
Yeah.
So obviously the Spanish, not that they're lazy, but
sensible maybe.
they know the ins and outs of what it takes to do the Camino.
Yeah. Why walk 800 when you only have to walk 100?
That's it. But yeah, also like, I'm not sure if you remember, but in La Rosaña, if you stayed there was this amazing Roman bridge, and then obviously the river was going straight through it. So as soon as we walked there, I'm like going...
That was just before Pamplona, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's just before Pamplona. Yeah, the last stop before Pamplona. Yeah. So as we walk in there, when Camino... Well, actually I say to everyone, but anyway.
Yeah, cyclists never say it back.
And no, Biciclino. Oh, I actually saw a Biciclino with an electric motor on his...
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah, there's been a handful of them. But anyway, getting back to the Roman bridge and the river, and I said to myself, as soon as I finish up for the day, that's me in the afternoon, the sun's out, you know, cold water, and that's me, you know. So I finished up with the Spanish guys and headed down to the river, and I met this incredibly interesting Danish guy. Turns out one guy used to work for Lego.
Oh, wow.
As a high executive.
Because Lego's a Danish company, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. It's the biggest company in Denmark.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thing led to another, and he started talking. And he told me one of the most interesting things I've heard in years, which is a long time ago, probably about a good 10 years ago, Lego wasn't doing as good as they had been done in the past. And obviously they've done all these case studies and everything else. They figured out that kids' attention spans had decreased by over 50%.
Oh, wow.
So what they had to do is, instead of all the blocks being in one big giant plastic bag, they had to like individualise each bag for the process of actually like unpacking it, so kids could put it all back together quickly.
Oh, okay. So if you had a set to make a house, that all had to be in one bag.
All had to be in one
they
bag.
couldn't work it out.
I remember playing Lego when I was little. I used to love to throw everything out, just picking, actually spending the time in picking out the pieces.
Yeah.
So it gives you this insight into this now generation that kids grow up with iPads.
I can see a Camino lesson or a Camino metaphor coming here.
Oh, for sure.
Two dogs fighting in front of a cheese shop.
Yeah. Again, like, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there was a guy by the name of Mark. He runs a pretty good YouTube channel called Overlander TV.
Oh, I thought his was great.
His documentary.
I loved it.
I think it was about 2004.
Yeah.
And it was such a personal, insightful documentary, which again for me that's probably the best. Apart from the movie, which the movie is what it is, but as a personal account, and there's been a couple that people have done really, really good actually. But I think still not because he's Australian. And
no, I like Mark's the best of all.
Mark's one because it's sort of like he's just honest. He just goes, today I've just cracked the shits with the Camino. I'm over this. I'm over that. And then the next day is like going, I just sat in the field and experienced this, and all of a sudden he goes, my Camino metaphor, you know? And like,
yeah, that's right. I want to buy a motorbike or,
yeah, and I find, and then also, because I've been following him both on YouTube and on his Facebook, he's just completely transformed his life. You know, like he looks at the camera and he just goes, I'm sick of sitting in an office, I'm sick of like not being, you know, like I want to go out there and explore the world, and he did that. He spent there was a video that he did, a combination of everything he'd done. He spent 630 odd days outside of Australia, and he explored all of South America. He went to Cuba, and he did. And I remember just sitting there going, "Good for you."
Yeah.
You know, you've literally like unplugged from the matrix.
Yeah.
Which, again, a metaphor for modern life, which you either accept or you don't. But and he just decided to just do something on his own. He seems quite a grounded character because even before I left. I remember reading on the actual link to his Camino documentary. He still like writes to people when people are like, "Oh, Mark, I'm doing the Camino this July," and then like instead of like being 2 months later reply, within like a day or two, 1 day reply, Mark's like going, "All the best, looking forward to hearing from you."
Oh, isn't that good?
So I thought, what a
still sharing the experience.
Yeah, what a. And this is someone that's done it quite 11 years ago.
Wow.
And
yeah, I mean, anyone watching this, if you haven't seen, it's Overlander TV, isn't it?
Overlander TV.
If you haven't watched his Camino video, watch it.
The Camino documentary. And for me, that's. And I remember when I spent the first time I came back to Spain after 23 years. I got taken to Finisterre by the cousins. And I remember going to Finisterre when I was little. And went to Finisterre. And I didn't get it. I was sort of like, why are we going so far to a place that's just got like a lighthouse? So I wasn't, again, this Australian sensibility. Why should I travel 200 kilometres to the beach when I've got the beach?
That's right, I can go to Bondi.
I don't get it, you know. But anyway, we're there and one thing leads to another, and I don't know how I ended up down the beach. And I went for a swim and it kind of just hit me. It was almost like this baptism. It kind of just hit me. I'm like going, for thousands of years. I've been on for about 500 years ago.
And just the name is evocative, isn't it?
Fisterra or Finterra, end of the world. And it just hit me. I'm like going, for thousands of years, if this was pre-1492, okay, people thought that this was the literal end of the world. I'm like, I wonder how many people, because I don't think people have changed in the last 5,000, 10,000 years. I think we're still the same primordial creatures we've always been. And you know, just to go there and just go, well, what do I do? You know, do I swim and see what's out there, or do I jump on the boat, or
get a boat, see what's over the horizon?
Yeah, or do you do what they do in the way, which is, you know, for me one of the most beautiful things was it was by himself. The last little bit of ashes, he scattered them, and the resolution was, I've come to the end of it, but it's not the end of my life. And I've reached it. We finished the journey together. You know what I mean? And how honourable it is to scatter the ashes into the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean.
I love the way then he continues the sun's journey.
Yeah, and he turns around, and the next scene is like either through the streets of Marrakesh or through Morocco, with a huge grin on his face. It's the first time we've seen him with either alone, but just this really, really like stark smile. Camera zooms in, and he's confident, he's happy, and that's probably the stark reality of it, because at the beginning he just wasn't happy. And also any mature age person with a family and can always tell you, like, you do your things in your life because you want to make sure that your children have the best of it, but you and yourself not realising that
sometimes
you're repeating the same mistakes that your parents did with you, and bits and pieces. So, as the metaphor goes in that movie, you know, like, come with me, Dad, and he just goes, oh, we don't all have the luxury of getting up and leaving everything behind. And funny enough, in the end, he left everything behind. He left his golf buddies behind, and he went out and then just lived his life. He goes, you don't choose a life, Dad, you live a life.
That's right.
You know, just all these little, I mean, yeah, the little sound bites and the little snippets, and it's written by very, very clever, emotionally charged, you know, script directors and everything else like that. But, you know, like if it means something to you, then so be it, you know. I know for a fact that this is probably not going to change my life. My life has already changed a while ago. And I said so much so that I spent 6 months last year in Galicia. And I went back home in October last year, back home to Perth, literally opened the doors to my house and walked in there, and it was no longer home. To the extent that I had all the material things I've always wanted. There's a fantastic, a lot of people use them as sound bites now, unfortunately, on YouTube. There's a senior lecturer it was a senior lecturer at Carnegie University in the States. His name is Randy Pouch. He got diagnosed with cancer. See, a lot of people seem to think that Steve Jobs, you know, that really emotionally charged speech he gave.
The one he gave at university? Yeah.
Yeah, well, pre-internet or pre-YouTube.
I'm having trouble keeping up with you, Ramon. Can we just pause for a minute? My hand's also freezing on this camera. Yeah, there we go.
Again, like I said, YouTube kind of cranked along in 2005. So this was before. Obviously, it's changed now because people have gone back and re-edited his videos and bits and pieces. But he got diagnosed with pretty severe cancer, or pretty aggressive cancer. And instead of being fatalistic about it and I'm going, well, I'm dying, and you know, I spend time with my family, and which obviously he did too, but he went on a series of what he calls the last lectures.
Okay.
And in those last lectures, he just knocked everyone out of the park. And one was like accomplishing your childhood dreams. You know? And he goes on. I mean, in this kind of current generation, if it's not 5 minutes, people don't watch it. But it's not hard listening. It's not hard watching.
Yeah.
But for an hour and 30 minutes, Randy takes you on this incredible journey of like how important it is to fulfill all your childhood dreams.
Wow, I must look up that.
And this one goes on to his graduation speech, which he only had a few weeks.
Let these guys come through.
Which he only had like a few weeks left to live.
Yeah.
And a lot of those snippets, Steve Jobs like kind of borrowed and I wouldn't like to say stolen, but you know, plagiarised a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
And one of them was, in Randy's way, he just goes, you must find your passion. Whether you know whether you found it already, or whether you take it to your 30s or in your 40s, you must find your passion, because you won't find happiness in things or money.
No.
Because if you hold that as a barometer, okay, I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
If you hold that as a barometer, there's always going to be someone with more than you.
Yep.
Right. So this was that dilemma. As I walked into my house, opened up the door, and the place had been exactly how I left it. You know, thank God nothing had been stolen.
So you'd moved on. But you were looking back at that earlier life, I guess.
And I'm sitting there going, why did I need so much before? And this unfulfilled life of want and excess, you know, like, you know, it's good to have that big TV. It's good to have all this accoutrement of, you know, success, I suppose, for lack of a better word. And it kind of just cemented, and I just go, well, this is it. You know, like, I need to pack everything up and not make a permanent move, but at least have not, for me, for the house not to be an issue, and all my personal belongings, or rather shit, that's all it is really. So I packed everything up and then just rented the house out. I got a 12-month contract on it, and see what happens after that.
So why Galicia then? Is
Galicia,
the connection with the Camino and the movie?
No, well, I was born in Galicia.
Oh, okay.
A little village not far from one of the capitals of the province of Orense, which is only about 90 kilometres from Santiago.
Wow.
And the Camino, well, that was...
You could get a Compostela every weekend walking into Santiago.
Well, the La Ruta de la Plata, which starts in Seville, actually runs through Orense as well.
Yeah.
And that's the last 100 kilometres, and I always had people like, especially family, like, why don't you just start in Orense and get your Compostelano? I'm like, well, that's not the point, is it?
Nah.
The whole idea is you need to have some kind of
suffering. Time. You know, that's really interesting. I was pondering yesterday about what is a pilgrimage, and John Brearley, the the author of the guide poses this question to people very often before they walk the Camino. And what do you think a pilgrimage is? I came up with, it's got to be a fairly long journey. It's a journey. I think there needs to be a challenge, a bit of suffering, as you said.
Well,
what else?
I don't think.
I mean, this is not a walk, is it?
Well, it is.
It's not just a long walk.
Camino. It's not like trek. It's not hike. I think it's more than that. I think it's a. I stumbled across this, and this was an original thought to me a few days ago, probably if not a week ago, because as you can appreciate, a week kind of translates into a month in real time.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure when it happened, but it came to me. I'm like, I goes, well, up to around about 100 years ago, this is what people used to do. They used to walk from place to place,
yeah.
And having that time, you know, whether you say, for example, I live in this village and it's 30 kilometres away from the main place like Leon,
Yeah.
and for me to get there, I need to walk 7 hours, and in that time, I've got no distractions. I've got no way of taking a photo, because obviously by that stage, cameras are just so bulky, and so I've got no distractions. So he's just sitting there going, and this is again going back to the Overlander documentary. I always pondered why his soundtrack was peppered with all the birds chirping everywhere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was walking down through the Ronstradvalles.
Because there's loads of birds.
Yeah,
it wasn't an overlaid soundtrack.
No, that's it. I'm just sitting there going, oh, I get it. I get that. And I said, as soon as I get back, I can't wait to watch it again with these new eyes. It's like when you watch a movie and then 5 years goes past and then you watch it again and life changes.
Do you know it was that track down towards Roncesvalles, and I just stopped there because I'm sort of taking these videos all the way.
Total distance 6.44
Excuse
kilometers.
the GPS kicking in.
Total time 1 hour 33 minutes and 9 seconds.
Split time.
Split speed 5.1 kilometers per hour.
You're making me walk quicker.
You slow down.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason why you go into Camino.
Yeah.
It's not the race to Santiago.
No. And I should add, people on my blog know this, but the GPS there is just out of curiosity to know how far I've gone. This is not a race. But yeah, that walk down to Roncesvalles, I just stopped there. And it's funny you mentioned that place, because I just shot a video and said, listen, let's just stop now.
You know, it's almost like a surround sound of.
It is.
And if you just pause enough, you get these little things.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, unfortunately, we live in such a society that, you know, I personally think that everyone's pretty much bored 24/7. So we need the stimuli, because this thing upstairs that we really take for granted is like any other muscle in our body. It needs stimuli. It needs things, and I think that's why movies and music and everything else like that is just so important to us, because it engages in such a wide dynamic.
I think it kind of it opens up your mind a bit. I was talking to someone at dinner the other night, great guy, and he said, I really get pissed off when I say bring Camino to people and they don't hear me because they've got their earphones in. I said, Paul, I've walked quite a few times with music on a really peaceful part of the Camino, and it just adds a whole new level. You know, you play a little bit of music that has an emotional attachment,
for sure. Like you said,
wow,
you listen to the soundtrack to the way a few times, and it kind of just heightens your experience.
Yeah.
You know, and I think what I've learned from this, and I know it's going to be, even this is something that Mark says in his documentary, he realises he's going back into a difficult environment with difficult people, and something that kind of brought me a few days ago, seeing people that, I've had a blister, so I've caught a taxi to the next town, and I had this giant blister on the second day, and I still, again, what's a true pilgrim? I'm like, well, hobbling along, you know, like, and not letting that stop you, you know, not letting any kind of physical frailty stop you to go. The end goal being, there is no time. You know, and again, yes, it's a luxury, and I think for the most part, and people probably won't admit it, but for the most part, you really have to be a little bit wealthy to even contemplate the idea of like taking off a month or 6 weeks to do this.
Do you really think so?
I think so.
I mean, if you stay in albergos and eat cheap,
yeah, well,
you can probably do it on about 30 euros a day.
Yeah, but it's still $50 a day.
Yeah.
You've got to remember too, if you're coming all the way from Australia,
Oh yeah.
the cheapest flight is still about $1,500.
Yeah, we're talking about Australians, yeah.
Yeah. So relatively speaking, you have to be relatively comfortable. I mean, okay, from Australians' point of view.
Yeah.
Okay. So for you to take off a month or so this time of year, it's not like the end of the year because obviously that's when everyone gets the holidays. So you've got to be either financially or at least, you know, affluent enough to be able to afford that, and that puts you into a different category. But myself included, I could have turned around and just goes, well, I'm just going to do hostels, I'm going to do butterlaws, I'm going to do this and that, because you can't afford it. But you're sitting there going, like even like last night, I would have missed out on those amazing experiences because of my, I'm not going to say ego, but that unwillingness to sort of like be a true pilgrim, I suppose, or be, you know, I'm not sure if you saw it, but there's this order. They do the Camino, and they lash themselves.
Oh yeah,
as they're walking. Now, is that a true pilgrim? I'm not sure, but would I do that? Most definitely not. But
yeah, one of the things I think I've gained out of this, and it's, you know, an acceptance of people and being more flexible, and everyone does the Camino in their own way. And I think everyone I've spoken to have said, you know, well, what have you learned out of this, you think, so far?
Metaphors.
Yeah, and it's not these intense conversations, it just comes up while you're walking. And everyone has said, don't judge people.
Well, that's always been... I think I'm
We're very quick to judge, I think, in modern society, aren't we?
We are.
And we assume. We see someone and we think, oh, they must be a, you know, an XYZ.
Yeah, it's just, you know, in a former life, I did do psychology at university.
Oh, right.
And one of the reasons I kind of stopped doing it is because you started to know too many facts. Too many facts, and you just sort of like going, it kind of takes the fun out of either getting to know someone or it takes the fun of actually interacting with someone.
Takes the fun out of talking to psychologists, I tell you.
They're not a nice breed of people. I mean, if any psychologists are listening to this, you know you're not. So you're supposed to be helping us, and engaging us, and helping to deal with our, you know, whatever issues that we've come along with, or fears, or whatever sensibilities.
We could do away with the profession, just send everybody on this.
Yeah, a lot can be said about this. You know, like truly, the hardest thing is engaging a person on a day-to-day basis. And this is some of the conversation that I've had with a few people on the Camino. It's just, what I think this actually teaches you is you can be yourself. And I think the Camino just amplifies who you are.
Absolutely, yeah. It's okay to be yourself.
I've made peace with this last year when I was in Galicia.
Yeah.
I kind of did my own Camino last year. What really derailed me from doing it last year was this blogger by the name of Francis Dupont, which is quite internationally well known of things that he does. I mean, he's the only person to ever do the Pacific Continental Divide, or Pacific Trail, or whatever it's called in the States, forwards and backwards, so 9,000 kilometres. Took him like close to a year to do it. He's the only person ever done that. So he decides to do the Camino, and he writes a top 10 list of the reasons why you shouldn't do it. Now I'm sitting there.
I think I read that.
I'm sitting there reading it.
I obviously read it superficially because I took it as really negative.
Well, yeah, it was a little bit negative. But one of the things I still don't like is walking right next to roads all the time.
Like this,
but again, it is what it is. And if you know a little bit about the history of the Camino, you realise that it's not really the Camino. It's an interpretation of the Camino because the Camino has been lost. You know, up till about 30 years ago, no one was walking it. And you'd go through these specific towns because they were still part of it. But most of these trails are all brand new.
I was reading in a guidebook, I think it was last night, in one of the towns that we're coming up to, is it near Osorvero, if that's the right pronunciation? I think it was a priest there that started painting all the arrows 30 years ago. And there's this lovely story of him, he's in the Pyrenees in a minibus painting arrows up the Pyrenees, and the local Basque people are going, hang on, you know, what are you doing? And he says, I'm starting an invasion.
Well, yeah, it's just... But again, you've seen as well as I have that if it wasn't for these if it wasn't for the pilgrimage, a lot of these towns would have just completely disappeared.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is a fact that I know because I've so much time I spent in Galicia. There's over 3,000 abandoned villages in Spain.
Oh, you're kidding.
And half of them are in Galicia.
Wow.
If you think you've seen things so far,
Yeah.
wait until you get to Galicia.
Oh, no.
It is the most. I'm not saying it's not. You know, when everyone goes, "Oh, my child is really pretty," and
Yeah.
and ultimately it goes, but you realise he's ugly. But it's not sort of the father
Yeah.
having father's eyes. No. It's just. And I'm a pragmatist. You know, if it didn't have that natural beauty, I wouldn't be talking about it as much as I have.
No.
But the most startling thing about Galicia, and this has even been my personal discovery with places like my grandfather was and everything else, that Galicia is almost like it's stuck 200 years ago, 300 years ago.
Really?
It never evolved from that. And funny enough, the highest immigration of all people from Spain come from Galicia, because it was such a stark, unhospitable place at the best of times because it rains. Santiago's it's the city.
I'm
that
looking
rains
forward to the rain.
Yeah, well, I'm not. But Santiago is classified as probably the city that rains the most of the whole world. Because
Really?
It's just, yeah, it's just even in the middle of summer it rains.
Wow.
You know, it's just this incredible like natural beauty of these rolling hills and valleys, and you know, like I'm amazed they even like discovered to sort of like put roads into these little 2 or 3 house villages, you know, and like, village there, village there. And then you're walking, you go, there's no one in those villages anymore.
No.
Because everyone sort of like migrates to the cities, and you know.
Because I've noticed that even through the provinces we've walked so far, that a lot of the villages seem deserted, but wow, it gets worse, huh?
Yeah, no, it definitely gets worse. But again, at least you're here seeing like kind of reformed houses, and
Yeah.
a lot of people who sort of like might live in Burgos or might live in or far away places
Yeah.
like Madrid.
Okay.
They fix up the houses, like could belong to the grandparents.
Okay.
So they're still belong to the family. So they reform the houses a little bit. So when it comes to summer, they might spend 2 or 3 weeks in the village.
Yeah, okay.
It's almost like
And there's a lot of for sale signs up everywhere.
yeah. You probably remember going past the new abandoned village.
Yeah.
We had a bit of a
The one near the golf course.
Yeah, that was supposed to be was earmarked for over 10,000 people, and less than 20 families call it home now.
Wow.
And the pricing was close to roughly, it's an average of about €300,000, so about $500,000.
Gee.
But now you can buy them as cheap as less than €30,000, so less than 50,000.
Yeah.
But again, if you know a little bit about Spain's current history, is when they joined the EU, and there was just this influx of Euros coming through. Spain's actually got the most amount of kilometres out of the whole, like per country basis, in the whole of Europe. They've got the most amount of airports. They've got the most amount of infrastructure built of any nation in.
So you're saying this is from EU grants?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So what happens obviously when there's obviously a lot of corruption because there's a lot of money being handed out in bits and pieces. So for example, say you have a developer friend who's got, we're trying to say build, say accommodate, like I said, a place, 10,000 people right here.
Yeah.
Do they worry about infrastructure? Not so much.
Because some of that village is in the middle of nowhere.
No, exactly right. So, and that's actually only like the scratch the surface of it, because that's a widespread problem all around Spain.
So
There's entire. I'm sure you've probably seen these documentaries from China. The same thing too. These completely abandoned,
empty towns,
empty like cities almost. You know, expecting millions of people to come through, but I'm sure they will eventually fill them up.
So what's the deal with all the wind farms? There are wind farms everywhere.
Again,
is that some sort of
no, same thing again. These big, massive, capital, national projects.
Yeah.
They thought it was a good idea at the time, which again, it's not a bad idea, but you know, instead of, and this is something I can't speak for Sydney, but I know for a fact this is what's happening in Perth. Perth is a two-speed economy. Those directly or indirectly involved with mining,
which of course is slowing down.
Which is like exactly, and everyone else. So unless you're involved around the mining industry, you tend to struggle, you know. And a lot of people view it sort of like Perth as like, oh, it's wealthy, it's affluent, and everything else you want to go. Yeah, but what about the poor person who struggles on a basic 38-hour-a-week wage and still has to pay premium prices at the supermarket, premium prices at petrol bowsers and everything else like that? So it's incremental. I did not realise how expensive Perth was until I got back this last time. As I said, I spent 6 months living. It's not like I've done a proper living too. I bought myself a car. So you can't go without a car. I tried the first year. I had a bicycle and bought a mountain bike. And they can only get you so far, but with a car, obviously opens up a lot more horizons. And spending 6 months, Galicia, and from my eyes at least anyway, everything is cheap, bar the petrol. Petrol is expensive.
Can't get over the wine for €1.20 a glass.
Well, I was filling up in Portugal at 1.79 euros, and I think the tank ended up costing me close to $200 a tank.
Wow.
And behold me, I decided to buy, because I'm thinking, I can buy a pretty good German luxury tank for next to no money, because no one wants it because it's relatively expensive to keep on petrol. And it's like a third of the price what I get one in Australia for. I'm like, this is me. And realising that, wow, this is this is not Australia. Petrol is not this. But anyway, I went back and I couldn't believe just how expensive just a litre of milk was. I couldn't believe how expensive, to buy. And I'm going through this whole organic thing. I don't know. Don't ask me why, but it just seems to be the thing at the moment. You buy organic groceries before you realise you buy 2 or 3 things. It's $100. You're sitting there going, how can you afford this? If you don't have. I said, now that I saw the last 2 years, I've just been living on my savings. Not that every dollar counts, but you go, wow, you start to question.
A bit more careful.
And it's sort of like
talking about organic food. We've got a rest stop coming up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
How long was the? Do you remember how long the Overlander TV video was?
It's about probably about an hour and a half, or close to 2 hours. It's pretty long. But
this one's probably about 45 minutes. How am I going to upload this bloody thing?
We could do a documentary series every day. But,
we can.
But yeah, it's just the Camino's. Whichever way you come here, like I said, I've read the book 30 years ago, so I'm more right than you. I watched the movie last year, and however you got inspired, as long as you're doing it, whichever facet, whether you choose to do it on a bike or you walk.
So we'll just pause for a minute, and maybe just to finish on, if people were thinking of walking the Camino and were a bit unsure, what would you say to them?
Don't hesitate. Don't have any fear. Just walk. That's all it is. It's just one foot over another. You're going to have blisters. You're going to have difficult days. You're going to find difficult people. But the experience is worthwhile.
It's awesome. I haven't found many difficult people.
No,
there's maybe 1 or 2.
One or two, but again, it's. I said don't read those top 10 reasons why you should do this. Don't read the top 10 reasons you should do this. However you get inspired. However you get inspired. Again, if you watch that amazing movie and you go, wow, I feel something for it, I want to do it, and so be it. However the inspiration is, you're just going to try and have to find it, and if you do, incredible for you.
Ramon, I'll let you get on, mate. It's been awesome chatting to you. We'll probably have a coffee further along.
Oh,